My name is Michael Reeves. For 15 years, I believed I had the perfect life in Boston. A successful career as a software engineer, a beautiful home in a quiet suburb, and what I thought was a loving marriage to Sarah. We met in college, got married at 25, and built what seemed like an ideal life together. No kids, by mutual choice. We enjoyed our freedom and financial stability too much that I still remember the day we met in our computer science class at MIT. Sarah wasn't a tech person. She was taking the class as an elective for her business degree. She sat next to me, completely lost during the first lecture on algorithms. I offered to help her, and that simple act of kindness bloomed into coffee study sessions, which turned into dinner dates, and eventually led to a proposal on the Charles River Esplanade during our senior year. After graduation, I joined a promising tech startup while Sarah pursued a career in pharmaceutical sales. We bought our first apartment in Cambridge, a tiny one-bedroom that barely fit our combined possessions. But it was ours. 3 years later, we upgraded to a beautiful Victorian home in Brookline, with a wraparound porch where we'd have Sunday morning coffee and plan our future together. Sarah excelled in her career, quickly climbing the ranks at Pharmagen Industries. Her success meant frequent business trips, which started as occasional overnight stays in New York or Philadelphia, but gradually extended to week-long conferences in Chicago, San Francisco, and even international destinations. I never questioned her late nights or weekend conferences. Trust was the foundation of our marriage, or so I believed. That I was the kind of husband who surprised her with flowers on random Tuesdays, remembered anniversaries with thoughtfully planned celebrations, and supported her ambitions without hesitation. When she wanted to take a risky position with a higher commission-based salary, I encouraged her. When she needed to invest in a new wardrobe for her executive-level meetings, I happily funded it. We had our occasional arguments, like any couple, but nothing significant. At least, that's what I told myself. Our friends often commented on how perfect we seemed together. Relationship goals, they'd say when we'd host dinner parties in our meticulously decorated home. Sarah was charming and vivacious in social settings, always the life of the party, while I was more reserved but always by her side. Proud of the beautiful, intelligent woman I'd married, in our 10th year of marriage, we took a second honeymoon to Italy, 2 weeks of wine tasting in Tuscany, wandering through ancient ruins in Rome, and romantic gondola rides in Venice. Sarah seemed distracted at times, frequently checking her phone or stepping away for work calls, but I dismissed my concerns. Why wouldn't a successful pharmaceutical executive need to stay connected, even on vacation? Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. The gradual emotional distance, the new friends I never met, the unexplained expenses, the way she'd withdraw from my touch sometimes, claiming fatigue from work, the mysterious weekend training sessions that seemed to multiply, the decreasing frequency of our intimate moments. But love makes you blind, and I was completely in the dark about the storm brewing in my perfect life. Our last happy moment, truly happy, without the undercurrent of deception I'd later discover, was Christmas Eve the year before everything fell apart. We decorated our home with thousands of twinkling lights, a massive pine tree in the bay window of our living room, and holiday music playing softly in the background. We exchanged gifts by the fireplace, and Sarah gave me an expensive watch, with our initials engraved on the back. For my forever love, the inscription read. The irony of that message would haunt me later. The first time I felt something was wrong was last December. Sarah had become increasingly protective of her phone, always keeping it face down and taking calls in another room. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to find her side of the bed empty. I found her in the kitchen, quickly ending a call when I walked in. Work emergency, she explained with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Go back to bed. But I'd caught a glimpse of her screen. It definitely wasn't her work email open. I didn't confront her then, but the seed of doubt was planted. The following week, I noticed her perfume had changed. For years, she'd worn Chanel No. 5. I'd given her the first bottle on our first anniversary. Now she smelled different, more exotic, a scent I couldn't identify. When I mentioned it, she casually explained that her friend Jessica had recommended it. Thought I'd try something new after all these years, she said with a shrug. I'd never met a Jessica in her circle of friends. By mid-December, Sarah's behavior became increasingly erratic. She'd come home at odd hours, sometimes not until the early morning, with elaborate explanations about client dinners and emergency meetings. Her work wardrobe changed too. More revealing blouses, higher heels, designer clothes that weren't her usual style that I tried to rekindle our connection by suggesting date nights and weekend getaways. But she always had an excuse: deadlines, presentations, client commitments. When I surprised her at her office one day with lunch, her assistant looked confused. "Sarah's not here today," she told me. "She called in this morning to say she'd be working from home." I drove home with the untouched lunch beside me, a knot forming in my stomach. Sarah's car wasn't in our driveway. When she eventually came home that evening, I asked where she'd been. "Strategy meeting at the regional office," she said without missing a beat. "I mentioned it last week. Don't you remember?" I didn't, because she never had. But I nodded anyway, not yet ready to confront what I was beginning to suspect. That a week later, I noticed a significant withdrawal from our joint account. $25,000. When I asked Sarah about it, she claimed it was for an investment opportunity through her company. She became defensive when I asked for details. "Don't you trust me? After all these years," she snapped. The next day, I checked our credit card statements and found charges I couldn't explain. Expensive restaurants on nights she claimed to be working late, hotel charges in Boston, our own city, where we own a home, and shopping sprees at high-end lingerie boutiques. Items I never saw her wear. In January, Sarah suggested we update our wills and insurance policies. "We're not getting any younger," she reasoned, "and we should be prepared." She'd already contacted a financial advisor and an insurance agent, both recommended by her colleague Thomas. I'd never heard her mention Thomas before, but she suddenly spoke of him frequently: his investment advice, his financial acumen, his success in the pharmaceutical industry. Then came the insurance policy. Sarah suddenly insisted we needed better life insurance. She had the paperwork ready, a $2 million policy on me, with her as the sole beneficiary. I signed without much thought. After all, it seemed like responsible financial planning. What struck me as odd was that she declined my suggestion that we take out a similar policy on her. "My company benefits are sufficient," she insisted. "Besides, you're the primary earner. We need to protect your income." This wasn't strictly true. With her commissions, Sarah often earned more than I did. In February, she suggested a romantic getaway to Cape Cod, during a snowstorm no less. She insisted on driving separately, claiming she needed to visit a client on the way back. "I'll meet you at the hotel," she said. The Ocean View Resort was nearly empty due to the off-season and approaching storm. I checked in alone, waiting hours for Sarah to arrive. When she finally did, she seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone and smiling at messages that she quickly deleted before I could see them. That weekend, her behavior was strange: distracted, constantly checking her phone, and suggesting I take walks alone on the beach during a blizzard. "The ocean is so beautiful in a storm," she insisted. "You should experience it. I'll wait here where it's warm." Something felt profoundly wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. On our last night at the resort, I woke up to find Sarah on her laptop at 2 a.m., quickly closing it when she noticed me stirring. "Just checking work emails," she said. But I glimpsed what looked like flight information, not for Boston, but for the Cayman Islands. The drive home was tense and mostly silent. Sarah kept making cryptic phone calls when I stopped for gas or coffee, speaking in hushed tones, and ending conversations abruptly when I returned to the car. When we got home, I found a brochure for luxury real estate in the Cayman Islands in her travel bag. When I asked about it, she claimed it was promotional material given to all attendees at her last conference. "Tax-free investments," she explained. "Everyone in pharma is talking about offshore opportunities." By early March, my suspicions had grown into a gnawing certainty that something was very wrong in my marriage. I considered hiring a private investigator, but couldn't bring myself to take that step yet. Instead, I started paying closer attention to Sarah's schedule, her explanations, her increasingly frequent absences. One night, I checked her car mileage after she claimed to have been at a local client dinner. She'd driven over 100 miles, not local at all. Her gas receipts showed purchases in Providence, Rhode Island, 2 hours from Boston. Another red flag appeared when our neighbor mentioned seeing an unfamiliar black SUV parked in our driveway several times while I was at work. "Thought you might be renovating," he said. Guy looked like a contractor. I hadn't hired any contractors, Then came Sarah's sudden interest in my daily routine. She asked detailed questions about my commute, the routes I took to work, which coffee shops I frequented. She suggested I try a new route, one that took me along a less populated stretch of road with steep embankments on one side. Less traffic. She explained, "You're always complaining about the congestion." In retrospect, all the signs were there. I was just too trusting, or perhaps too afraid of what I might discover, to see them clearly. March 15th. A date forever etched in my memory. I was walking to a coffee shop near my office when a black SUV swerved onto the sidewalk. I only saw it at the last second, just enough time to partially dive out of the way. The vehicle struck my left side, sending me flying into a storefront window that I remember fragments of the aftermath, the shattered glass around me, bystanders rushing to help, the wail of approaching sirens. Then darkness that I woke up in the hospital with a broken leg, 3 fractured ribs, and a severe concussion. The doctor told me I was lucky to be alive. A few inches difference, she said, and we'd be having a very different conversation. When Sarah visited, something seemed off about her reaction. She seemed disappointed rather than relieved. She kept asking about the insurance paperwork and when I might be released. Her questions focused more on administrative details than my well-being. No, I was so worried, or thank God you're alive. Instead, it was, did they say when you'll be back on your feet? And we should contact our insurance right away. The police called it a hit and run. Officer Jenkins took my statement, noting that several witnesses described the black SUV as driving, with purpose, directly toward me, not like a driver who had lost control. He promised to review traffic cameras in the area and keep me updated. 2 days into my hospital stay, a detective named Rodriguez visited me. Middle-aged, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen too much, he had the demeanor of someone who rarely brought good news. "Mr. Reeves, we have reason to believe your accident wasn't random," he said gravely. "We have evidence suggesting someone may have hired the driver to target you specifically." My mind reeled as he explained. The SUV had been found abandoned, 20 miles outside Boston. Inside, they discovered a burner phone and a manila envelope containing my photo, my daily schedule, and a map with my regular routes marked in red. Most damning of all was a partial payment receipt, $10,000, with another $40,000 to be paid upon job completion. The detective showed me text messages recovered from the burner phone found at the scene. Messages between the driver and someone arranging a permanent solution to a husband problem. The number linked back to another burner phone purchased with Sarah's credit card. "I'm not saying your wife is involved," Detective Rodriguez said carefully, "but we need to investigate all possibilities. Has there been any unusual activity in your relationship recently? Financial changes? Life insurance policies? Marital problems?" The questions hit me like physical blows as I connected the dots. The life insurance policy, the unexplained withdrawals, the strange behavior at Cape Cod, her disappointment at seeing me alive. Could Sarah really have tried to have me killed? I shared my suspicions and recent observations with Rodriguez, who took detailed notes and promised to look into Sarah's activities discreetly. "Don't confront her," he warned. "If she is involved, it could be dangerous for you. Let us handle the investigation." But the real revelation came when my friend and IT specialist, Dave, visited. We'd been friends since college, and he was one of the few people I truly trusted. Concerned by what the police told me, he offered to look into Sarah's activities. "I can do some digging that might be off the official books," he said quietly. "Digital footprints, email accounts, that sort of thing. Only if you want me to." "Mike," I hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Do it. I need to know the truth." Within days, he returned with a laptop and an expression that told me everything before he spoke a word. "You should sit down for this, buddy." Dave had uncovered the devastating truth. Emails between Sarah and her lover, Thomas, planning my accident and discussing how they would split the insurance money. He showed me message after message, each more horrifying than the last. "The policy is in place. 2M with no questions if it looks like an accident. Sarah found a guy who'll do it clean. Wants $50K. Steep, but worth it for our future. Thomas, M takes the same route every day at 8:45. Easy target. Sarah, after it's done and we get the money, Caymans. No extradition. New names, new life. Thomas, I can't wait to wake up beside you every morning without having to rush home to him. Sarah, each message was like a knife to my heart. 15 years of marriage, and this was how it ended, with the woman I loved plotting my death for insurance money and a new life with her lover. But the most chilling part? There wasn't just one lover. There were 3 different men she was involved with, each manipulated into helping with different aspects of her plan. Thomas was just the primary accomplice. Dave found evidence of Sarah's relationship with James, her co-worker at Pharmagen, who had helped her set up offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands to hide the insurance money. Then there was Robert, her personal trainer, explaining the frequent gym visits that never seemed to change her physique, who had connected her with the hitman through some shady contacts that I also discovered she'd been embezzling from my company through a shadow account she'd set up in my name. For 3 years, she'd been siphoning funds, small amounts at first, then increasingly larger sums as she grew bolder. Everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. Dave showed me photos from her secret email accounts, Sarah with Thomas in hotel rooms, Sarah and James on what appeared to be a weekend trip to Montreal, Sarah kissing Robert in the front seat of his car. There were videos too, intimate moments she'd shared with these men while I worked late, believing I was building our future together. "I'm sorry, man," Dave said, his voice breaking. "I never would have thought she was capable of this. Neither had I. The Sarah I thought I knew. The woman who nursed me through pneumonia during our 2nd year of marriage. Who surprised me with a rescue dog on my 30th birthday. A dog she'd later claimed had run away, but had actually given away because it interfered with her activities. Who had stood beside me at my parents' funeral. Was a carefully constructed fiction. When Detective Rodriguez returned the next day, I shared Dave's findings. Though he was concerned about how the information had been obtained, he agreed to use it as a starting point for the official investigation. "Stay in the hospital as long as you can," he advised. "You're safer here. We'll put surveillance on your wife and her associates. Just don't tip your hand. Act normal when she visits." So I did. I became an actor in the twisted play my life had become. When Sarah visited, bringing flowers and takeout from my favorite restaurant, I smiled and thanked her. When she asked about the insurance paperwork, I told her I'd signed the forms and they were being processed. When she suggested I recuperate at a special facility rather than at home, a facility I later learned was located on a remote, wooded property owned by Thomas, I non-committally said I'd consider it. Every smile, every touch, every kiss on the cheek from her now felt like poison. But I played my part, all while planning my response. I checked out of the hospital with a clear mission, justice. But I needed to be smart. Sarah still thought her plan had failed due to simple bad luck, not because I knew the truth. This gave me an advantage, the element of surprise. My first step was securing my physical safety. I told Sarah I'd be staying with Dave for a few days while our home was modified for my wheelchair and crutches. In reality, I moved into a secure apartment Dave had arranged, with 24-hour security and no connection to my name. From this safe location, I began building my case and planning my response. I knew I couldn't confront Sarah directly. Not yet. First, I needed to ensure she would face the fullest consequences of her actions, both legally and financially. First, I contacted the best divorce attorney in Boston, Eleanor Martinez, known for handling high-profile cases involving fraud and financial crimes. Her retainer was steep, but she was worth every penny. I showed her everything: the evidence of the murder plot, the embezzlement, the affairs. "We need to move carefully," Eleanor advised during our first meeting. "If she realizes you know, she might attempt something more desperate. You have strong evidence, but we need to make it bulletproof before filing for divorce." Together, we crafted a comprehensive legal strategy. Eleanor brought in forensic accountants to trace all the money Sarah had stolen and hidden. They uncovered accounts in the Cayman Islands, property purchased under aliases, and evidence of tax fraud spanning years. "She's been planning this for at least 3 years," the lead accountant told me. "The first offshore account was opened 38 months ago. Next, I hired a private investigator to document Sarah's activities and gather more evidence on her accomplices. Ben Ramirez, a former FBI agent turned PI, took the case personally after hearing my story. "This is one of the coldest plots I've encountered outside of organized crime," he said, shaking his head. "Don't worry, Mr. Reeves. We'll get everything you need." Ben and his team followed Sarah, Thomas, James, and Robert. They photographed meetings, recorded conversations in public places, and documented the continuing conspiracy. Despite my accident failing to kill me, the group was already planning another attempt, this time considering poison, which would look like a complication from my injuries. I set up hidden cameras in our home and installed tracking software on our shared computers, all legally with my attorney's guidance. The footage captured Sarah searching my office for financial documents, making furtive calls to her accomplices, and even practicing a tearful widow's performance in front of the bathroom mirror. On the financial front, I moved methodically. I secretly moved my assets to secure accounts and changed my insurance beneficiary to my sister. I documented every financial transaction from the past 5 years. I reported the embezzlement to my company's board, trusted colleagues who agreed to hold off on official action until my legal case was ready. I compiled medical reports, police statements, and witness accounts of my accident. Detective Rodriguez provided official documentation of the investigation, which now included surveillance reports and forensic evidence linking Sarah and her accomplices to the hit-and-run driver, who had fled to Canada but was now being tracked by authorities. For 3 months, I lived a double life. By day, I was the recovering husband, gradually returning to work, attending physical therapy, and seemingly oblivious to my wife's betrayal. I accepted her hollow displays of concern and support, all while recording every interaction at BY night. I worked with my growing team of legal and investigative professionals, building an airtight case that would destroy Sarah and everyone involved in her scheme. We gathered evidence of conspiring to commit murder, fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and tax evasion. Most importantly, I pretended everything was normal. I played the role of the oblivious, recovering husband while gathering evidence that would destroy Sarah and everyone involved in her scheme. I even suggested we take a trip once I was fully recovered, maybe to the Caribbean. I proposed casually over dinner one evening. Sarah's eyes lit up at the mention. "The Cayman Islands have beautiful resorts," she suggested immediately. "We could go in July." I smiled and agreed, knowing that by July, the only trip she'd be taking would be to a federal courthouse. The hardest part of this period was maintaining the facade in public. At dinner parties with friends, I had to sit beside Sarah, holding her hand and pretending we were still the perfect couple everyone believed us to be. I had to laugh at her jokes, accept her public displays of affection, and pretend I didn't notice her texting Thomas under the table. Each night, lying beside the woman who had planned my murder, I reminded myself that patience would yield the most complete justice. Each morning, I woke up and reassured myself that soon, very soon, I would reclaim my life and watch as Sarah lost everything. By June, my case was ready. My injuries had largely healed, though I still walked with a slight limp, a permanent reminder of my wife's betrayal. The police had located the hit-and-run driver in Vancouver and were arranging his extradition. My divorce filing was prepared, along with motions for emergency asset freezing and restraining orders against Sarah and her accomplices. All that remained was choosing the perfect moment to spring the trap. The day I executed my plan was Sarah's birthday, June 12th. She had organized a dinner party with her closest friends, including Thomas, who she introduced as her work colleague. The guest list included several of our longtime couple friends, Sarah's sister and brother-in-law, who knew nothing of her crimes, and 2 of her accomplices. James had been invited but called with a last-minute excuse. Robert, the personal trainer, was there with his legitimate girlfriend, who was also oblivious to his affair with Sarah. I played the devoted husband all evening, complimenting the new dress she'd bought for the occasion, serving drinks, and proposing a heartfelt toast to many more years of happiness together. Sarah beamed, clearly believing her secrets were safe and her plans still on track. Little did she know, I had invited Detective Rodriguez and my attorney to arrive at 9 p.m. I had also arranged for Dave to escort a special guest, the hit-and-run driver, now in police custody and cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence. As Sarah was cutting her cake, the doorbell rang. The look on her face when the detective entered the room is something I'll never forget. A flash of panic quickly masked by confusion, then forced hospitality. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Detective Rodriguez announced, showing his badge. "Sarah Reeves, we need to ask you some questions regarding the attempted murder of Michael Reeves." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Sarah, whose face had drained of color. Thomas immediately stood up, claiming he needed to make a call. Two uniformed officers blocked his path. I stood up slowly, looking her directly in the eyes. I know everything, Sarah. The affairs, the embezzlement, the insurance policy. I know you tried to have me killed. The evidence was presented there, in our living room, in front of our friends and family. The emails, the photos, the financial records, the testimony of the driver, who identified Sarah from a photo as the woman whose description had been given to him by his contact. This is ridiculous, Sarah sputtered, looking around the room for support. Michael is confused. His medication, from the accident, it's affecting his mind. But no one believed her. Not after Detective Rodriguez played a recording of her conversation with Thomas the previous week, discussing a plan B if I didn't agree to the Caribbean trip. The social fallout was immediate and devastating. Friends we'd known for years looked at her with horror. Her sister burst into tears, asking repeatedly, "How could you do this?" Thomas attempted to flee but was detained. Robert's girlfriend slapped him before being escorted out by officers. Within minutes, our house, once the scene of so many happy gatherings, had become a crime scene, with officers collecting evidence and taking statements from shocked guests. Sarah was not arrested that night. The district attorney wanted to build the strongest possible case before taking that step. But she left our home in disgrace, surrounded by former friends who now looked at her as a monster. She went to stay with her parents, who soon asked her to leave after I provided them with copies of the evidence. My divorce filing made headlines in local papers. Tech executive divorces wife who plotted his murder. With the evidence I'd gathered, the divorce proceedings were decidedly in my favor. Eleanor Martinez was ruthless, presenting documentation of every betrayal, every stolen dollar, every conspiratorial message. Sarah's attorney, an expensive criminal defense lawyer named Gregory Walsh, attempted to portray me as a controlling, abusive husband who had driven Sarah to seek comfort elsewhere. This strategy backfired spectacularly when Eleanor presented videos from our home security system showing Sarah's behavior when she thought no one was watching, calmly discussing murder plots on the phone, laughing about my trust in her, bringing Thomas into our home and our bed. The divorce judge, a stern woman in her 60s, was visibly disgusted by the evidence. "In my 30 years on the bench," she said during the final hearing, "I have rarely seen such calculated betrayal and disregard for human life in a marriage." The divorce was granted in record time, with exceptional terms. I received 95% of our marital assets. Our home, which we had purchased together but had primarily been paid for with my income, was awarded to me entirely. Sarah's retirement accounts, investment portfolios, and personal property of value were all transferred to me as damages. Perhaps most satisfyingly, the judge ordered that Sarah's designer wardrobe, the clothes she'd worn while deceiving me, the lingerie she'd purchased for her lovers, be sold at auction, with proceeds going to a foundation for victims of domestic violence. Her precious collection of jewelry, including items gifted to her by her accomplices, was liquidated to pay my legal fees. That Sarah's reputation was destroyed beyond repair. Former friends refused to speak to her. Her employer fired her immediately after learning of her crimes, citing moral turpitude clauses in her contract. Professional associates distanced themselves, removing her from industry groups and committees. The pharmaceutical community in Boston, and soon nationwide, thanks to industry publications covering the scandal, knew her as the Black Widow of Brookline, a cautionary tale of ambition turned to murderous greed. Even Sarah's parents, initially supportive despite their shock, eventually cut ties with her after the full extent of her actions came to light during the criminal proceedings. Her sister, once her closest confidant, provided a victim impact statement at the criminal trial, speaking of the trauma of discovering her sister's true nature. The social destruction was comprehensive and permanent. Sarah Reeves, once admired, respected, and envied, became a pariah, a name spoken in whispers, a cautionary tale told at dinner parties she would never again be invited to attend. For me, watching her social world collapse was both vindicating and heartbreaking. Despite everything she'd done, a small part of me still remembered the woman I thought I'd married. But that woman had never really existed. She was a carefully crafted illusion, a mask worn by a stranger who had shared my bed for 15 years. the divorce proceedings concluded with one final, devastating blow for Sarah. The judge, in an unusual move, added a personal note to the final decree. It is the finding of this court that the defendant, Sarah Reeves, engaged in conduct so egregious and contrary to the sanctity of marriage that she should be forever barred from making any claim against Michael Reeves or his estate. Further, the defendant's attempts to portray herself as a victim in these proceedings demonstrate a profound dishonesty that this court finds particularly contemptible. When the divorce was finalized, I held a freedom celebration with my closest friends, those who had stood by me throughout the ordeal. We gathered at Dave's lakeside cabin, far from the scene of my former life, and ceremonially burned the few photos of Sarah I had kept. As I watched her image curl and blacken in the flames, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The divorce was just the beginning of justice, but it was a crucial step in reclaiming my life. While the divorce proceedings were painful but relatively quick, the criminal case against Sarah and her accomplices was more complex. The prosecutors were particularly interested in the financial crimes that accompanied the murder plot, as these provided a clear paper trail and motive. District Attorney Melissa Chun personally took charge of the case, recognizing its high profile and the opportunity to send a message about domestic crimes of this nature. "This case represents the ultimate betrayal of trust," she told the press. "We intend to pursue the maximum penalties allowed by law." Sarah was charged with attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and tax evasion. Thomas faced similar charges as the primary accomplice. The other two men, James, her colleague, and Robert, her personal trainer, were charged as accessories to attempted murder and various financial crimes. The preliminary hearings were tense. Sarah, once impeccably groomed and confidently stylish, appeared in court in a plain suit, her hair pulled back severely, her face devoid of makeup. She pleaded not guilty to all charges, maintaining that she was the victim of a vindictive frame-up, orchestrated by me. This defense collapsed when the evidence began to be presented. Emails describing the murder plot in explicit detail. Bank records showing the payment to the hitman. Phone records placing her in contact with all three accomplices at critical times. The testimony of the driver, now fully cooperating with prosecutors. Most damning of all were the videos, Sarah in our home, speaking on the phone about the accident, laughing about how easy it had been to convince me to increase my life insurance, discussing what she would do with the money once I was out of the picture. During the trial, email after email was presented showing Sarah discussing my removal and how they would spend the insurance money. Phone records showed her coordination with the hit-and-run driver. Forensic accountants testified about the complex web of financial fraud she had created. Thomas turned on Sarah almost immediately, offering to testify against her in exchange for leniency. On the stand, he revealed that the murder plot had been entirely Sarah's idea, that he had initially been reluctant but was manipulated by her promises of wealth and a new life together. "She told me Michael was abusive," he testified, not meeting my eyes across the courtroom. "She said she feared for her life, that she needed to escape. I believed her at first. Then I realized she was lying, but by then, I was in too deep." James, the financial accomplice, similarly claimed to have been deceived about the nature of the offshore accounts he had helped establish. "She told me it was for tax purposes, for a legitimate business venture," he insisted. The prosecution easily disproved this with emails in which he explicitly referenced the insurance payday and when Michael is gone. Robert, the personal trainer who had connected Sarah with the hitman, offered little defense. "I made a terrible mistake," he told the court. "I was infatuated with her. She made me feel special, needed. I didn't think about the reality of what I was doing, that a real person would die." The hitman himself, now identified as Victor Mendez, a former bouncer with connections to organized crime, provided crucial testimony. He described in detail how Sarah had orchestrated the hit through Robert, specifying exact times and locations where I could be found, and insisting it had to look like an accident. "She wanted him hit by a car," Mendez testified. "Said insurance wouldn't pay for suicide or obvious murder. Had to look like bad luck, not foul play." The financial investigation revealed she had stolen nearly $350,000 from my company over 3 years through falsified invoices and shadow accounts. She had also been planning to sell our house and empty our accounts once I was gone, with properties already selected in the Cayman Islands and money transfers scheduled to begin days after my planned accident. Another startling revelation came when a former colleague of Sarah's testified about overhearing her joking about life insurance policies being better than divorce at a company holiday party 2 years earlier. I thought she was making a dark joke, the witness said. I never imagined she was serious. Sarah took the stand in her own defense, a decision her attorneys had advised against. She was poised at first, tearfully describing our marriage as controlling and emotionally abusive, claiming that I had tracked her movements and isolated her from friends. All blatant lies that contradicted years of social media posts, text messages, and witness statements from our friends. Under cross-examination, District Attorney Chin methodically dismantled Sarah's narrative. When presented with her own emails describing murder plans, Sarah claimed they were fantasy role-play between her and Thomas. When shown financial records of her embezzlement, she insisted I had authorized the transfers. When confronted with the hitman's testimony, she claimed he was lying to save himself. Her facade cracked when DA Chin played a video recovered from Thomas's phone. Sarah, laughing as she described how I would be run down like a dog in the street, and how she would play the grieving widow just long enough to collect the insurance and disappear. In that moment, Sarah's mask slipped completely. Her eyes, cold and calculating, swept the courtroom until they found mine. The hatred in her gaze was palpable, not remorse for her actions, but rage at being caught. It was the first time I'd seen the real Sarah, the woman behind 15 years of deception. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts for Sarah and her accomplices. The sentencing hearing was equally swift. The judge, noting the cold-blooded, premeditated nature of these crimes, imposed maximum sentences. Sarah's statement before sentencing, a tearful apology claiming she had been lost and under the influence of manipulative men, was received with visible skepticism by the court that I gave my own victim impact statement, looking directly at Sarah as I spoke. For 15 years, I believed I was married to someone who loved me, I said. Instead, I was living with a stranger who saw me only as an obstacle to her ambitions, a life to be sacrificed for insurance money. The physical injuries from the hit and run will heal, but knowing that the person I trusted most in the world orchestrated my attempted murder, that's a wound that may never fully close. When the sentences were announced, Sarah's composure finally shattered completely. She screamed and lunged toward me, having to be restrained by court officers. "You ruined everything," she shrieked, her face contorted with rage. "You were supposed to die? You were supposed to die." Those words, echoing through the courtroom, eliminated any lingering doubt about her guilt. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, had become a stranger consumed by greed and hatred. Yes, she was led away in handcuffs. I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sense of closure. The nightmare wasn't over, but the most dangerous chapter had ended. Sarah and her accomplices would pay for their crimes behind bars, while I would face the equally challenging task of rebuilding a life shattered by betrayal. The trial made national headlines, appearing on true crime shows and becoming the subject of a best-selling book titled Till Death: The Sarah Reeves Conspiracy. Media outlets sought interviews, which I declined. My story wasn't entertainment. It was a cautionary tale about the dangers that can lurk within seemingly perfect relationships. In a surprising development during the financial investigation, authorities discovered Sarah had attempted to take out similar insurance policies on her previous boyfriend, though that relationship had ended before she could execute any plan. This discovery led to investigations into 2 other suspicious accidents involving men she had dated before me, though no charges were ever filed due to lack of evidence. Beyond the criminal and divorce proceedings, there was a third avenue of justice that proved particularly satisfying: financial retribution. With the guidance of forensic accountants and my legal team, I pursued every cent Sarah had stolen, hidden, or obtained through deception. The embezzlement from my company was the most straightforward to address. Once the criminal conviction was secured, the civil case for restitution was nearly automatic. The court ordered Sarah to repay $347,862 plus interest and penalties, a judgment that would follow her even after her eventual release from prison. More complex were the offshore accounts and hidden assets. Sarah had been meticulous in concealing her financial tracks, using shell companies, nominee directors, and complex legal structures in the Cayman Islands, Belize, and Panama. She clearly believed these funds would be untouchable, ready for her new life after my accident. What she hadn't counted on was Dave's exceptional digital forensic skills and my willingness to invest in a specialized team of international financial investigators. Over the course of 18 months, this team traced and recovered nearly $1.2 million hidden in various accounts around the world. The most satisfying financial victory came when we discovered a luxury condominium in Grand Cayman, purchased through a shell company linked to Thomas, but actually owned by Sarah. The property, a beachfront penthouse worth $3.5 million, had been their planned escape destination. The Cayman authorities, cooperating with U.S. law enforcement, seized the property and liquidated it, with the proceeds returned to me as the victim of the conspiracy. Every asset Sarah had accumulated, her investment portfolio, her luxury car collection, her designer wardrobe, her art and jewelry, was systematically liquidated to satisfy the judgments against her. Items she had particularly treasured, like her collection of rare watches and first-edition books, were sold at public auction, with the proceeds going to victim compensation funds and charities supporting domestic abuse survivors. The financial unraveling extended to her accomplices as well. Thomas, whose family came from wealth, was sued by his own parents after they discovered his role in the murder plot. They removed him from their will and filed a civil action to recover family funds he had contributed to the conspiracy. James lost his CPA license and was banned from the financial industry for life. Robert's personal training business collapsed. When former clients learned of his involvement, by the time the financial retribution was complete, Sarah had been stripped of everything. The woman who had plotted my death for financial gain was left with nothing but prison commissary funds and the knowledge that the wealth she had accumulated, both legitimately and illegally, was gone forever. One particularly elegant stroke of financial justice came through Sarah's own machinations. In her planning, she had established several trusts and financial instruments that would only activate upon my death. These were designed to move money quickly once the insurance paid out, bypassing normal probate processes. My financial team repurposed these very same legal structures, using them to systematically claim and recover her hidden assets. The traps she had set for my estate became the mechanisms of her financial destruction. But a further layer of satisfaction came when I established the Truth and Recovery Foundation using a portion of the recovered funds. This nonprofit organization provides resources and support to victims of similar betrayals, people whose spouses or partners had conspired against them criminally. The foundation offers legal assistance, financial counseling, and psychological support to help others navigate the devastating aftermath of intimate betrayal. In a twist that even I found rather poetic, the foundation's first headquarters was established in a building purchased with Sarah's recovered Cayman Islands funds, where she had planned to start her new life after my death. Victims of similar conspiracies now found help rebuilding their shattered lives. In the end, the justice was comprehensive. Sarah received 25 years in prison for attempted murder and financial crimes, with no possibility of parole for at least 18 years. The judge specifically cited her profound betrayal of sacred trust and complete lack of genuine remorse in imposing the sentence. Thomas got 18 years for his role as the primary accomplice, with the possibility of parole after 12 years based on his cooperation with prosecutors. James received 5 years for his financial crimes and knowledge of the murder plot, plus substantial fines and restitution payments. Robert was sentenced to 8 years for connecting Sarah with the hit man, though his sentence was later reduced to 6 years due to his consistent cooperation and evident remorse. The hit-and-run driver, based on his cooperation and the fact that he had been misled about some aspects of the job, received 15 years with the possibility of parole after 10. The divorce settlement awarded me 95% of our assets, our home, and required Sarah to pay substantial damages, though the criminal restitution orders took precedence, meaning most of her remaining assets went toward repaying my company for the embezzled funds. That was 2 years ago. Today, I've rebuilt my life from the ashes of betrayal. The process wasn't easy or quick. 4 months after the trial, I struggled with insomnia, trust issues, and occasional panic attacks. How do you move forward after discovering the person who shared your bed for 15 years had calmly planned your murder? Therapy helped. Twice weekly sessions with Dr. Abernathy, a specialist in betrayal trauma. So did the support of true friends, especially Dave, who checked on me daily during the worst periods and never once said, "I told you so." Even though he had expressed concerns about Sarah years earlier, MY Company not only survived the scandal, but thrived under my more focused leadership. I've expanded my software company into a successful cybersecurity firm that specializes in fraud detection, turning my personal nightmare into a business helping others protect themselves. Reeves Security Solutions now employs over 50 people and provides security consulting to financial institutions nationwide. I sold our house, too many bad memories, and moved to a modern apartment downtown with an incredible view of the harbor. The Victorian that once represented my dream life now belongs to a young family with children who will hopefully fill it with genuine love and happiness rather than the elaborate deception that characterized my years there. As for Sarah and her accomplices, their fates have followed predictable trajectories. Sarah has exhausted all appeals of her conviction and sentence. According to prison reports, she is an isolated figure, avoided even by other inmates who despise her particular brand of cold-blooded betrayal. She has made 2 unsuccessful attempts to publish a memoir claiming her innocence, but publishers have universally rejected the manuscript, recognizing the overwhelming evidence of her guilt. Thomas, despite his cooperation with prosecutors, has struggled in prison. His background and temperament made him ill-suited for incarceration, and he has reportedly suffered significant harassment from other inmates. His expected release date is still a decade away. James served 2 years of his 5-year sentence before being granted early release due to good behavior and continuing cooperation with financial crime investigations. He now works as a janitor at a community college in Arizona, his financial career permanently destroyed, his reputation irredeemable. Robert, the personal trainer, has apparently found religion while in prison. He leads fitness programs for other inmates and, according to mutual acquaintances, seems genuinely remorseful for his role in the conspiracy. His girlfriend, understandably, left him immediately after the birthday party revelations. Victor Mendez, the hit-and-run driver, was eventually extradited from Canada and is serving his sentence in a medium-security facility in Massachusetts. He has provided information on other criminal enterprises in exchange for certain prison privileges, but will remain incarcerated for at least 8 more years. As for me, I found that life after betrayal is possible, though changed forever. I dated casually for a year after the trial, but nothing serious. The experience left me with a heightened awareness of deception that made forming new relationships challenging. How do you trust again after such a profound betrayal? The answer came unexpectedly, in the form of Rachel, my current partner. We met at a cybersecurity conference where I was a speaker, a psychiatrist specializing in recovery from trauma. She was there researching digital privacy concerns for her patients. Our conversation after my presentation extended to dinner, then to regular meetings that gradually evolved into a relationship built on a foundation of radical honesty. Rachel understood my trust issues without taking them personally. She was patient when I needed to verify information or battled moments of irrational suspicion. Most importantly, she helped me see that Sarah's betrayal reflected her character, not mine, that I wasn't foolish for trusting my wife, but rather the victim of an exceptionally skilled manipulator. I'm cautious about marriage again, though not completely opposed to the idea. Rachel and I have discussed it, but agreed there's no rush. We're building something genuine, free from deception or ulterior motives. I've learned that true intimacy isn't about blind trust, but about choosing vulnerability with someone who has earned your confidence through consistent honesty. The irony isn't lost on me that Sarah's attempt to end my life ultimately led to a rebirth of sorts. I'm more discerning now, more attuned to inconsistencies and red flags in people's behavior. My business success has exceeded anything I might have achieved in my previous life. The foundation I established helps others recover from similar betrayals, transforming my personal trauma into a force for good. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if the hit and run had succeeded, if Sarah and her lovers had gotten away with murder and enjoyed the life they'd planned with my insurance money. It's a chilling thought, but one that reminds me to appreciate each day I've been given. In the end, Sarah's betrayal taught me a painful but valuable lesson that sometimes the greatest danger comes from those closest to us, hidden behind masks of love and devotion. But it also showed me the incredible resilience of the human spirit, our capacity to recover from even the most profound betrayals, to rebuild shattered lives, and to find meaning in the aftermath of devastation. That I still have the watch Sarah gave me that Christmas Eve. For my forever love, the inscription reads, I keep it in a safe, not as a memento of what I lost, but as a reminder of how far I've come. It's a symbol of my journey from blind trust to informed confidence, from victimhood to empowerment, from betrayal to rebirth. Sarah planned to end my story. Instead, she only ended a chapter, unwittingly setting the stage for a new and better life than the false one she had helped me build. That, perhaps, is the greatest victory of all. That if you found this story compelling, please subscribe to our channel for more real-life accounts of betrayal and its consequences. Remember, these stories are shared not to promote vengeance, but to illustrate the human capacity for resilience in the face of profound betrayal. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better.